Hey everyone, Adam from Underground Hive again with the third part in our series. This is the mix breakdown for the song Under the Moonlight by Underground Hive, as you can see in the background here. Uh, Parts 1 was drums, part 2 was bass, and typically in a song I would think of doing guitars third, but in this song keyboards really took place of like a signature guitar. So when we wrote this song, as I mentioned in the bass video, the bass riff was the first riff that birthed this song, and the second riff was the keyboard riff. And there's a lot of keyboards going on. As you can see, there's 10 tracks of keyboards here. Keyboards in orange, and for lack of a better way to describe it, guitars almost act like a keyboard would in this song, and keyboards take over that lead role like a guitar would. It's a keyboard-based song, so that's why I'm doing keyboards here. So let's get on and dive in and see what we can do here. All right, we're in Reaper, and I'll play you the raw riff. That this is how the song first started after the bass riff. Get the hi-hat out of there. Has no business in there. All right, first thing you'll notice is that it's hard pan to the left. We play with some panning, and this I mentioned this in the bass video. What I try to do on my mix is I set some goals for myself. I set one, I want to do as few decisions as possible. Sorry, fumbled my words there. I want to have a go-to EQ, I want to have a go-to compressor, and I only want to change that if something's not right or if something doesn't sound great. And that way I don't have to spend a lot of the times. I've seen a lot of comparison videos on the internet, like, let's compare all the top 4 compressors to each other, and they all sound great. They sound different a little sometimes, but they all sound usable. Like any one of those, the Waves has this studio rack thing that you can immediately set up all your settings and go right in before, and now you've wasted 2 hours working on the compression for a snare drum. Guilty, but still. So what I wanted to do here for panning, early on I learned about LCR panning. It's left, center, right. The old ancient analog consoles had a dial, and it was left, center, right. There is no real center. You have a left and a right speaker. There's no center speaker in stereo audio. But by kind of emulating that, they're able to emulate a center channel. I don't want to get in arguments, especially I've had this discussion with my guitarist a number of times of, if you put your guitar at 36 left versus 63 right versus 48 left versus 2 right, no one's going to care. No one's going to notice. If I put something at 90% left, it might as well be 100% left. If I put it at 80, it might as well be 100. If I put it at 20, it might as well be up the middle. It's those little minute things. People use them instead of EQ for separation, that's another philosophy. It's completely wrong. I won't really get into that now. But I want to make my decisions as easy as possible. So for 99% of the stuff we do, it's 100% left, 100% right, or up the middle. In this song, both having the bass and the keyboards right up the middle was too much for the brain to deal with. If you look at this from like an indie pop view, or like a straight ahead 3-chord rock view, there's too many parts and one of them needs to go. If you look at it our view, we can fit as much stuff as we want, why we have 10 keyboard parts here. But seriously, it's the parts work really well off each other. They counteract. But if you have them right up the middle like that, your brain kind of goes, what do I listen to? Bass keys. Oh, there's vocals. That's up the middle. What do I listen to? So we decided kind of a default for our band is keys 100% left. And that's kind of their spot. If you look at it, at the way we play on stage, I'm stage, bass is stage left, which is 100% right to the listener, and keys are stage right, which is left to the listener. So we decided to do that. So that said, why do we have 10 keyboard tracks when certainly nobody can play 10 keyboards at once? we kind of have this philosophy in our band that we're a live band that does recordings. Our live shows, the song like this one, we've played this song 12 minutes long before, and it's a 5-minute song, and 5 minutes is long. We've played this, extended the keyboard solo, we've added a guitar solo, we've just vamped on things and done like band intros while the drums are playing, all sorts of stuff. We like to think that we have a different live show than our recorded material, and therefore when it comes time to recording, anything goes. I tell Ray, hey, we're in the middle of a quarantine here, go nuts. And Ray sends me 10 keyboard tracks. I guess I get what I asked for. But there's some really cool shit in here. We'll get to it. I'll play it for you. I want to start out with what I'm doing on the keyboard bus. And there's no surprise here. I'm putting Kramer master tape on. And another thing I want to mention, all the tracks are audio. They're stereo audio from the keyboards. We're not using any MIDI. We're not using any VSTs for instrument VSTs. Only MIDI in this track is the snare drum triggering the MIDI clap through Easy Drummer. Everything else is audio, which means we get the benefits of that. We get a live performance. We get truly synced up to the music. If you look at I think in the drum video, I showed you how the drummer plays behind the beat. Showed you one of the kick drums. He consistently gets that behind the beat groove going in. And if you put something time align and just right on the beat like that, like half the shit is these days, it just doesn't sound as good. There's no energy there. Takes away the performance and what we all grew up in music listening to in the first place. So that said, stereo tracks, no MIDI. Downside is I don't get to choose what sounds I want. Upside, I don't get to choose what sounds I want. So anyway, back to this. So Kramer master tape, when we get into some deeper sound, I'm not hitting it very hard. Every once in a while, it'll get up to 0, maybe a little more. I want this on the bus, and I don't want to have to do it on each individual track because it works better. For keys, at least for me, it works better on the bus. And then we have the room reverb again, and this one's a little higher. It's only -7 dB. I want these keys to shine through more and reverberate more, unlike the bass in the last video. And then I put this with the exciter plugin, or the exciter send, just to give more of a top end sheen to it. So we get onto this Rhodes sound here. Solo this out. So first thing, I did add this back to the exciter as well. Kind of a double layer of getting that extra harmonics and extra frequencies there. But what you find is I have a pattern for what I do. Like I mentioned in the bass video, it's EQ, compression, saturation. What plugins I use sometimes matters, sometimes doesn't. But the theory and the technique behind it is always the same. So first thing I did, I liked the Shep 73 on this. I do a high boost, pretty good 6 dB. I do a 4.8K of 8 dB, and then I do a high pass filter at 160. I also, because I want this full left, I just set this to mono. And that was done kind of after the fact. So a lot of times I get all the, I'll do some real quick panning and real quick EQ and compression and things. And then as a band, we kind of decide where things go spatially. And otherwise, I would have just put a mono, the mono version of this plugin. That's the only reason why I did this. And then some goodness of the preamp. So before and after. Before. After. So it just jumps alive. It adds that sheen to it. It adds some brightness. It adds some airiness. And actually, let me choose a better place for this. All right. So next is compressor. I love the LA2A style, in this case the Waves CLA2A, for guitars and keys. Things that are more of a melody instrument, I guess is the best way to put it. It's also stupidly easy to use. There's 2 knobs. You set the peak reduction where you want. I'm aiming right around 3 dB, and I do that more mathematically than ear. which is maybe not the greatest way to look at it, but my mind is more analytical for things like this. It cuts out, every once in a while I hear them, the notes stick out right here. Without the compressor, they really stick out. With the compressor, just tames them down a little bit. They still get that, the Rhodes being a touch-sensitive instrument has that, the harder hits that he hits are going to be brighter, but the compressor just tames them down. And then JS saturation on there, kind of add a little more of that sheen to it, and it doesn't dirty it up, it kind of enhances it. It's very, the JS saturation is very similar to the Exciter, is from what I found out in my dealings with it. So we have this. The second one is another Rhodes. It's actually a different sound, but the way he's playing it is very similar to the first one. That's how we put it on 2 different tracks. There's a couple things where he's doing together. So just this one alone, I use the same, I call this like a raindrop, or kind of in the bells kind of sound. What I did for this is the 73 again, but I did a little bit less. It didn't need as much, so I only did a 4 dB on the mid or highs, and a little less than 5 on the mids, and then the same high pass filter. I did punch the input up a little bit to drive a little bit more, and then compensate it with the output filter. So before, it's kind of dull, and then after, just adds that sheen onto it. And the same thing, the LA2A. One of my favorite chords in the world is this thing. I could just listen to that all day. Anyway, next keyboard track. So this takes us through up into the third verse. The third verse was a complete mess for us because we had, when I set Ray loose on this thing, he created 4 keyboard tracks for the third verse, which is already a more busier verse. There's more going on the guitars. There's more different things going on the bass. The drummer's doing his open hi-hat thing. And there's just the vocals are busier, there's more words being sung. So when I first saw these 4 keyboard tracks, I freaked out. I'm like, Ray, I don't know what we can do with this. And then we spent a little bit of time and got them to work. So here's really where the hard panning came in. The first 2 tracks that come in the first half are this kind of synth thing, and we pan these hard left. I'm on the wrong place here. So if we go to the first one, again, I have EQ and compression here. This is I was using REQ here. I thought it sounded better, or it was. I wanted more control over what the Sheps gave me. The 1073 style are great, but they have they don't have, like, I can't go to 121 or 831. Not that I do it on purpose. I just sweep around and I try to find the right frequency. Sometimes it just doesn't work with a analog model plugin. So I use something like this. In a future recording, I would do the re-EQ. Reek? I don't know what the hell to call that thing. So anyway, before EQ, and then after EQ. All I'm doing here is a high pass filter, low pass filter. I do a cut where that kind of cheap sound again. That lower mids that just kind of doesn't sound good. Okay, and then I do a bump, and this is more like a high mid bump, or right in the mid bump. If I crank this up, kind of gives it that telephony type sound. I wanted this to kind of stick out in a space that nothing else was taking. That's what I did here. Here, let me bump that up again while it's actually on. I don't want too much, so I did 4 dB here, and then I hit it with the 2A again. And again, the 2A is so easy. Ray's keyboards sound great on the way in, so I don't really need to do much to them. I don't want to color them too much, so I want the simple. I don't want like REA EQ, re-EQ, I don't know, or recomp. there's so many different choices. I can compress different bands. I can do this. I can do ratios in increments of like, like tens and hundreds space, all the way up from 100 down to 1. I don't want that many choices. I want to make it simple. So we have this one. We have next this soft. He called it synth arp soft, like arpeggiated soft thing. Alright, so EQ on this is pretty much the same thing. I wanted to accentuate and really have this stand out. So I did a high pass filter, and then I did a bunch of, I did one low cut, I did a bunch of high bumps. One in mid and one in the highs. So before, it's kind of not there, and that's not going to stick out through anything. And then having this just stick out. And then hit this with the 2A. And then both of them together. So you got that on the left. In the middle, I will switch over to both of these. On the left side we have a strings, and on the right side we have a Wurlitzer. So here's where I changed my philosophy on panning. I recently discovered that in cases like this, I need other choices, and I need to put things like this, which I could cut these out of the song and no one would know, and it wouldn't really matter. And Ray was like, when he gave me these, he's like, I don't know if you can put all these things in because it's really busy and there's a lot, but they sound so cool. I mean, this Wurlitzer, again, that's like bell sound, like in the Rhodes earlier, and the way it, the speaker shakes and things like that. If anything, the strings could go, but then I don't have anything to offset it. So what I decided to do is make an altercation to my LCR, and I made L 50%, C 50%, R. So I have 5 choices now for EQ, but I try not to use them unless I have to. For these, we have 2 pan to the left, we have guitar on the right, and we have these keys in this like spots where the notes stick out. There's nothing else in there in the frequency spectrum, so they kind of stick out. I'll play it afterwards after I go through the processing. So do the strings first, and you're going to be surprised. I do EQ here with high pass and a low pass. I put this second band in for a cut at 280, but since the low pass or high pass is so far up, it probably doesn't even do anything. I just left it there anyway. And then I hit it with the 2A. As you can see in the waveform, I'm going to extend this out, make sure you can really see it. It's gone off the screen. You can see these really hard hits. And instead of manually editing those, I decided to just hit it with a compressor. And you can see the compressor jumps way up. Because I still wanted it to stand out. I just didn't want, things to go... I just didn't want things to get lost. So we have that. And then on the Wurlitzer side... This one needed a little more help EQ-wise, so I gave it almost that telephone effect again. High pass, cut out some at kind of 300 again, 350. Gave it a boost kind of in the mids, and then low pass up here at the 5K range. So before, kind of muffled, and then it now kind of stands out. And then again, no surprise here, 2A. So the 2 of these together. And now we'll get to all 4 keyboards together in this part. So there's a main thing going on in this left speaker, and then you have each of these kind of just poking out. So what I'll do is I'll play the entire band here so you can see how even with everything going on, you can still make out the parts, but they don't take away from anything, and they still kind of add to things, even if it's just a little weird thing off to the side. So here we go. Alright, so that's the what started out as a nightmare verse and actually turned out to be pretty cool for me. and for us as a band to be able to come up with this cool sound. Moving on, going on to the B3s in the choruses. So here's the main sound that, and he's doing a little counter melody here. So sound-wise, EQ to make it. This is even more of a telephone sound. High pass, low pass, little bump or little cut, and a bump in the mids. This one's at 2K, and I wanted this to stick out more because this is where the heavier guitars are going on, and where bass is almost doing more drone type playing, sticking on the roots and things like that. And it was funny because when I heard this, I'm like, that's a really cool counter melody, Ray. Have you been doing that the whole time? And he's like, yeah, all 5 years or so we've been working on this song, or playing the song. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I've never heard it before. And now I find myself, I hear this all the time. Like, this is a really cool kind of counter melody to what's going on. So anyway, a little side story. But again, I hit it with the CLA-2A. Works really well with like distorted type stuff, distorted guitar. And this is more, I treat this more like a distorted guitar. There's a B3. Then he has a second B3 in here. It's doing basically the same part. And I treated this very similar, except I wanted to do more of a cut at this like really ugly sounding frequency. Because that sounds just bad and muffled and badly muffled. But again, a bump up here. I did right at 1,000. Actually, I didn't do it again here. What am I looking at? There we go. Just over 3,500, 2.5, and then a high pass filter down here, and a low pass filter at 7K. The high pass is over at 135, and then again hit it with the CLA-2A, and then both of them together. And I left these panned up the middle, but they're stereo tracks, so they're really pan stereo. Actually, maybe I do have. Yeah, I haven't panned up the middle, so wanted them to kind of. We have guitars hard pan right and left, and I wanted this to be like the wall of sound with the guitars. So actually, with the guitars in there. And actually, I don't have any effects on the guitars yet. That's the next video. So anyway, that's the B3. Last non-solo instrument is what Ray called the synth slide. Play a little bit. So this one I hit with the same things, although I did a much bigger high pass filter. This is at 325. It just had a lot of body to it that really wasn't needed. And then I did a couple real quick, I did another one right 300, 400 range, a little boost at 1.5K, and then a high shelf around 5K. And then I hit that through the CLA as well. Could have probably used a different compressor, but at this point I think I just copied and pasted it over. One cool thing that he's doing in this slap bass part is, I'll put the bass on with the keyboards. He's doing the synth slide along with the B3. So that was kind of a cool effect that he did with that. All right, so we are on to the last part of the keyboards, which is the keyboard solo. And get that over here. Here's the raw track, completely untreated. All the delay was on Ray's original sound. It wasn't anything that I added. It was he time synced it to our project, and that's all his effects that have delays and things on there are all time synced to the BPM of the project, and then he went kind of nuts with the recording. So I'll just play it a little bit on its own without the bass. So it sounds really good as it is. But I wanted to get a little bit more focused. I treat keyboard solos like this, like I would a lead guitar solo. Try to let the original sound shine, but I want to cut it through a little bit and throw a little bit of analog stuff on there and goodness. Again, EQ, compression, saturation. So EQ on here, high pass, low pass, cut it out. You'll see a pattern here. I don't know why I use the REQ6 when there's REQ4, but there it is. So this kind of boosts a little bit in the mids, 3,500-ish, 3.5K. And I took out some of the low end rumble, and then I cut out some of the 300-ish. This is actually all the way down to 200. I also wanted to get this to be a mono. I originally mixed this in the first kind of rough mixes. It was stereo like you're hearing now. I wanted it up the middle. So the best way to do that, I found, is to process it the way you want and then put a mono plug-in after it. I also wanted a little bit of more of a boost on the highs, and I think this probably came in afterwards and in the mixing process. So I just added the Renaissance EQ 2-channel or 2-band and as a mono. So you'll hear before and after. You'll hear it shrink to the center. So this is before and after. It's kind of flexing in the middle. And then I hit it with the 2A again. This is great for guitar solos because it adds some analog goodness, but it doesn't really color it. And then the Kramer again. And this actually adds a bunch to it. It adds some grit, and you can actually hear what it's doing. So before, and then after. Alright, so that's it for keyboards. I will leave you to the soothing sounds of Ray's keyboard solo. Next video will be guitar, and we will see you soon.